Good morning. Today is September the 23rd, and we are on the outskirts of Tropical Storm Ophelia, and therefore the weather's a little rainy today. I'm going to apologize in advance for the nature of the video. My mainstay gimbal camera died on me last week, so I have an improvised mix of cameras today. I don't know how that's going to end up working out, but we are local today because of the weather, and we'll see how things go. I'm kind of winging it with a unique mix of cameras. It's going to be probably a little bit more shaky, so it is what it is. Let's get going, see where we are. Okay, we're recording. So to begin with, again, the nature of this video is going to be a little bit more experimental, mainly because, as I alluded to in the intro, the main gimbal camera I have been using broke on me last week due to some clumsiness on my part, and it's not salvageable, and much to my chagrin, no longer available when you go looking on Amazon for it. So this video is going to be an experimental mix of things. I've fallen back on my police body camera mainly because if I put the police body harness on it, and that's probably the most stable alternative, as well as battery life would go as well. Excuse me. I ended up staying local this week because I'm kind of getting over a bit of a cold. It is too damn early in the season to have a cold, but I also lack control over every little aspect of that, so it is what it is. The weather today is we're batting low 50s, and the drizzle from the outer edges of what would be considered Tropical Storm Ophelia, which right now is probably beating the shit out of the shoreline around Delaware somewhere to the south of us. But much like Lee, big storms, so stretches out over the East Coast a lot. So let's kind of divert our attention briefly about, we will get to Bigfoot in a bit, but so gear failures in the field. Once in a blue moon I touch upon this topic, usually when I've had one, much like the I had a Removu K1 3-axis gimbal camera, which was pretty sturdy, and in the field a fairly reliable thing more often than not. That being said, its point of weakness was in the neck, and I broke its neck inadvertently last week. So, as an aside, where we are right now is during the winter I had encountered an infrasonic pulsing weirdness. We are in that area today, for transparency. So there's also been occasional activity in this area too. So I went looking for a replacement K1, only to find out, as my suspicion was, that when you go to the Removu site, most of their things are currently like a gimbal, a powered gimbal stick that you use an existing camera with. I already had something like that I'll be testing out today too, but it's kind of large and not as streamlined as the actual K1 was. If I can find a replacement, I will get one. Little Eastern newt there. What I'm not going to get, and I probably have covered this in a previous video, some people might say, well, why not get a DJI Osmo? Well, because the Osmo is an effing scam, and I'll tell you why. When you are flying a DJI drone, what's the difference, you ask? Well, when you're doing that and you need an app to plug in, I get the need for the FAA to follow things up. And on an interesting front there, the remote ID stuff that was due to rear its ugly head at the end of the month, well, actually this last week, is postponed for till sometime in March of 2024, mainly because the if you go out looking and you have an older drone like I do, I have a couple of drones, but I have two that are over the weight class and are in need of a module to support remote ID. And so far, if you go out looking online shopping for one, the FAA has basically lied and said that it would run you about $50. There's a cheap one for $39 that I don't know is compatible, and then you get into like bigger, more independent ones you can just like kind of pop on there with double-edged tape or some such, and those are a wee bit more than $50. One was like $145, another one was like $265, which at that point you're practically redoubling the investment I put in the DJI Spark in the first place. The other one so I have a Potensic, I think it's a P50, I forget the model number, but it's got a not a gimbal camera, just like a straight line of sight camera, which is what's the word I'm looking for? It basically, you don't get gimbal stability in the footage, so you get a lot of, I'm finding it hard to get through here today because there's a lot of deadfall. At least I didn't step in the moose poo right there. This is a pond I know well, I have fished at before. Didn't catch anything on the trip that time, but anyway, I'm digressing. So the Osmo is a camera that does not work until you plug it into an app, which is, I couldn't get the thing to freaking link up right. I'm like, this is actually a scam at that point. And then you have another model that is basically the knockoff of the Osmo. You don't need an app for it, but I briefly had one 2 years ago, and it lasted 3 months before it just basically crapped the bed in moderate weather. It wasn't rainy, it wasn't snowy, it wasn't cold, it wasn't hot, it wasn't muggy. That's better. And as a result, these little flimsy two-way gimbal things are not meant to be out in the out of doors because they haven't lasted long. So what I do have with me today, it's a Chinese-made police camera. What's recording right now is a police body cam. It is not a perfect solution, but with a police harness, which actually in the winter is an extra layer of warmth, works actually fairly well because it's close to your core. Is a reasonably stabilized camera minus your own body movements, which you can't walk through here stiff like a robot. It just can't be done. So I will move at a slow and steady pace as best I can to compensate for that. I also have a head-mounted two-axis gimbal camera, which does a decent job as well. I'll switch to that if this one. The advantage of this one, though, is number one, it does do some element of night vision, at least at close range, and battery life. I think its battery life is like 10 hours, which at a certain setting, the higher the resolution of the video, I think that chops down to about 8 hours, but that's still not too bad. You can get a whole hike in with this thing at that point. And I have a powered gimbal stick that I'm going to use with an action cam for stability. It also works pretty well with my 360 camera, if you don't mind a fishbowl look to the videos you're watching. And unfortunately today that's what I have to work with, so it's going to be a mix of things. if I remember right, the police camera gives you a lot of, I don't know if the date's set right. So if it says like November 2004 or something, just, it is not. It is September 23rd, 2023. We're not doing time travel. The thing that's fascinating about this place is, depending on the time of year you're here, it has a completely different personality to it. I remember I was here the one time we had decent snowfall during the winter last year, and we got up near the pond over here, and the snow was going from like ankle deep to like crotch level deep, and it was getting painfully hard to get through there. So I opted to kind of limit my foray that day. So the pros and cons of the gear I have. This one, again, battery life. With the harness that I have with it, it's reasonably stable, I think, considering. Now, again, granted, if you are running through the woods for your life because you have a bunch of wolves chasing you or something, it's going to be bouncy because you're running for your life with wolves after you. It is what it is. But, yeah, pardon my hucking. The cold is also what it is. But I had planned to go to Vermont today, but in lieu of the fact that A, it's the busy season at work and I have a bit of a cold, I don't want to overtax because I don't really have the luxury of missing a day during the week should I get sicker than I was during the week. I was kind of run down for most of the week, as you can hear. But advantages of this one, it's also hands-free, which is not unhandy, and it does do a decent night vision, which you can switch to, which doesn't really have an adverse effect on the battery life either. The battery life is probably its chief advantage, but it does a decent job. And if I can't find another Rimovu or like product, then we're going to have to work out a new mix of things that maximize the benefit of use. I'm going to get home and see how this plays out. The one potential disadvantage is that it's at height level, so if you're talking with your hands, you have that kind of thing going on, which again can't always be helped. But as I'm in an adaptive situation today, we'll do what we can. I'm going to kind of do a bit of each of the video in the different cameras to kind of weigh the pros and cons of each. I think this one is probably the best overall for things like that, minus your hands going in front of it here and there. The pros of the headset looking one, again, it's hands-free. Its resolution is pretty good. The limitation is not the camera itself, it is the prone nature of a person to move their head. So you're going to get head swinging going on. Because again, human nature, you can't walk through here stiffly like a robot. And if you get into denser undergrowth, as I have gotten into fairly often, human nature is what it is. Your head is going to move around, and that is part of why I don't use the iCams anymore, really. Mainly just because you're too prone to moving your head around, so the video's kind of tough, you know, if you got motion sickness, because your head's moving all over the place. And again, you can't really help it because, okay, is this passable or not? Because I can't really, these big ferns are kind of blocking where my feet are going. But this area is, if you can see, kind of fairly level, not too crazy in elevation, so you're not good. It's actually, with all this fern stuff, if I actually had bothered to get a license for grouse hunting in Connecticut, I would. This would be some good territory for it. I did actually see some turkeys on the way in too, because up in Vermont I'm licensed for both. As well as, if I remember right, crows, which I'm not going to shoot because they're crows. And maybe I've read that towards the middle of the country, people don't like them getting into corn crops and things, so they will hunt and eat them. And if you do, okay. Not my thing. To the same effect, we have shitloads of freaking pigeons around. You're not going to see me eating one of those either. More because of the sky rat kind of connotation there, but you know, it's the perception you have of the bird. And in that case, as far as crows go, it's more because they're so damn smart. I kind of have a thing with squid and octopus on the same level, because when you watch these things in a documentary, they are disturbingly intelligent. Like, you know, is it really cool to be eating those things? Because it bothers me, you know. Raises some moral implications for me that I'm not totally comfortable with. Moving on, what else we got? We got the powered gimbal stick. That's the one I need to come back up to speed with. It would be ideal if I could use that with my phone, but for whatever reason the phone is just a little bit too heavy and the gimbal motor doesn't get on well with it. So, but it does work pretty well with my 360 camera. Again, giving the fishbowl perspective, or if you wanted to have a funky thing, if I found conversion software to do the whole 360 thing, but overkill. There's a guy that does a travel vlog. He's got a new 360 camera that is up on a big selfie stick, and he shows you the whole area around him, which I think people actually like my videos for a lot of the scenery, though, because I mean, we're in things like this and I have to remember to turn with the camera because I don't have the gimbal this time. And being that it's hands-free, that means the body's doing the turning and not the camera. The gimbal stick will allow that, although it's a little bit, the controls are not something I'm as familiar with yet because I haven't used it that much. It's a little bit on the heavy side. And a couple of moving parts depending on how you're using it. So I need to come up to speed, and if there's any portion of the video it's a little bit more wonky. And no, I'm sorry, Bigfoot did not do what I'm about to take a picture of, but you do have a lot of interesting terrain in here, though, and if you are a stick structure enthusiast, you know, knock yourself out. But click. Okay. I am of the impression that is a vastly overrated thing, but you want to just call it stick art and think it's cool as part of like the forest floor and all that. Fair enough. Here's another one. We'll show these and see what people say. You're right the first time. But I've also fallen into a pattern where I need to restart my phone every time I take pictures, because if I don't leave it on, it bounces around my pocket. Samsung phones have a funny way of just randomly launching crap. And I've butt dialed people before. I've sent but email messages to people at work. That's fun. And the like. But yeah, so if you are a fan of the Osmo, or at least what was it, the latest Osmo, you couldn't, maybe older models are different, but they're also probably harder to come by. But they need an app and will not work without the app, and that is BS. I remember being very annoyed when I spent like a day and a half trying to figure out how to get around that. And when I realized that you couldn't, you have a $400 camera that basically doesn't work without an app, which is BS. You get a flaw in the app, the camera basically has been rendered useless. Whereas every other single fucking camera that I have on my person today does not require that you have any kind of you have an app you can use with it, except for the body cam. It's a fairly rugged digital camera that does what it does, given the nature of police work and all that. That's why I kind of like it's not a bad choice for a repurposing of something for a different use. Per se, I'm not out here looking for bank robbers and the like, but that being said, minus your own body movements kind of making yourself kind of shaky, because kind of walking through a fern meadow here, and I got to kind of look down. It's good that it's hands free, because I have to look, and there's a couple of logs in here that are hiding on you, making it tricky. When I was looking for a replacement, though, the only internally, like, all one unit camera, you had the Osmo. I've already covered my disdain of such products. And the Femu, which looks exactly like the Fimi, which was a fragile little piece of shit that, although it did take decent video while it lived, it didn't survive 3 months. If it's that fragile, it isn't worth having. Maybe I got a dud, I don't know, but and again, it was a knockoff of the Osmo. You don't need an app. You have an app for it. But unlike that, I'll give it the credit that you can use it without the app, but again, maybe I got a dud, but I mean, the price on it, the Osmo is overpriced given the name recognition. And I think it was like $390 something. So practically, for all intent and purpose, $400, which is too much for a camera that is that fragile. And then you have the Fimi came in, I think it was like 200 and something. And a few of my cameras, including the body cam presently being used, was somewhere in that range, like 250. But I've had this thing for 2 years now, and it's pretty friggin' easy to use. You can use it fairly, like I said, when I got the $20 police harness thing, it works pretty well. And again, minus your hands coming up or whatever, I try to minimize that, but not always a possibility. But it doesn't have the same level of movement as the head wearable one, because your head just moves more. It just, you move, you look around more, you hear something off in the distance, and you look over that way. You're gonna have some choppy movement. Unless you're literally in a neck brace or something and you can't move your head anyway, which you shouldn't be out walking in the woods at that point anyway. Anyway, enough about cameras. Except, well, you have the 362, which, like I said, is a good camera, and I do have it on me. And the only difference is that when you do it in traditional video mode, you get like a fishbowl kind of thing, but that by itself is not the end of the world. It'll just look different from the rest of the video, and you can pretty much tell that I switched cameras. But I already let in indicating that I'm kind of off my game, because the other one kind of broke, and I have to figure out if there's a place where I can get a new one. So far, I went looking and it said it was unavailable, which, given the fact it is a little bit of an older model, what's that? I think that was a toad. It's nothing dangerous. It was just like I disturbed a toad for a minute. Sorry, buddy. Moving into Bigfoot stuff. The season remains slow, at least in my neighborhood. If there's things going, and when I say that, I don't really want to delve into matters of like obvious woo related nonsense that's BS, because that is a dime a dozen. You have a new guy coming out with crap every day. Last we knew, Mark Zaski, destined to make a complete ass of himself, is claiming he's part Bigfoot. And my only question to him at that point would be, and how did we come by this conclusion, Mark? Help me out with that. Because I'm going to have to throw my skepticals on and say, I'm sorry, but there's going to be a big fat grain of salt going with that. And if you're offended, oh well. However, if you do try to do with me what you did with the tall ones and try to freaking like copyright strike my videos or something, number one, I'm not monetized. So I would suspect, I'm not that big a YouTuber, but I'm also not monetized in my channel. I do this because I just like coming out and filming what I do. Just more of a sharing creative thing for me. So it's probably going to be harder to do that because you're not killing my sponsors, because the only sponsor you have is the sound of my voice. And he did actually get into some nastiness with the guy who, I'm not going to say his name for the sake of respecting his privacy. I don't know how he feels about being outed by name, but the guy that does the podcast was called a Nazi and all kinds of other interesting things because he has the audacity to disagree with this guy's more skeptical point of view. There are some entitled little POSs out there that think you just have to believe every comical statement they make, and if you don't, apparently that makes you Hitler's brethren, which is childish and sad. Whereas there are other people. I'm going to mention something else. I got to look it up if I have a signal out here. Let me see if I can find it, because I did join their Discord. This is more of a UFO thing, though. Bear with me a second. I'll give them a mention so I do have some actual relevant content as opposed to just yammering about my camera dying on me. I have ever so little signal. Let's see if I can find their name. I got to remind myself of it if they are. Sky 360 is a project where effectively they watch the skies for. They're actually fairly scientific. I have found, I do have an interest in the UAP phenomenon, but I find that a lot of the people in there are pushing new agey nonsense, and that turns me off. These guys seem fairly scientific, and they sell a hardware rig. I haven't seen it. I have to go and get more info, but they sell or give out specs for a rig where you put it out in your backyard. I don't know how light pollution is going to affect that, but they actually watch the skies. It's almost like, if you know what SETI is, it's a open source project where you run software where you basically are recording and sharing bandwidth to record these SETI attempts to locate audio signals from outer space that might be aliens. This is kind of the same thing, but with telescopes and cameras in the thing. It's a neat idea. And I believe it's simply sky360.com. You ought to give them a look if you're into UFO whatnot. And I would give a plug to a certain UFO enthusiast I am aware of online, but he is a bit of a nut job and has not always been the most friendly person. So frankly, screw him. He doesn't get to find out. He can find it out on his own. I don't play with people that I don't deal with anymore. If you are a person who is malignant and toxic online, I don't need to deal with you, and I choose not to. So suck it. In effect, suck it. I don't know if people know him. His last name rhymes with Shaluga. If you're aware of Bigfoot and UFO folks, you probably know who I'm talking about. He and I are not. I don't hate the guy, but I just don't agree with a lot of what he proposes. And people that just push the paranormal, anyone who's just pushing like literally anything and doesn't have a filter, if you're having fun, good for you, but that's good for you. I don't need to buy into your apparent nonsense. And this guy is, in my opinion, one of those. There are other people I could mention, but then you're giving them recognition that, quite honestly, in my opinion, they don't deserve. So that will not be happening today. Do I want to jump over there today? I think I'm going to stay on this side of the stream today just because I just don't really feel like jumping the stream. We got enough goodness out here to do that. What I'm going to do, though, for the sake of utilizing all cameras on me for the sake of a performance test, along with the videos segment breaks to break up a little bit of my banter, I am gonna, let's get a shot of this wetland over here, at least the entrance to it. This is one that's kind of frustrating because it's surrounded by undergrowth and when you try to get out into it, pardon me, you're knee deep in water really quick is the non-scientific way to say that. Excuse me. So from there, I guess the news is in UFOs lately. So with the congressional UAP things going on, couple of thoughts on that before I switch over. One, it's only natural given the government's history with UFOs and subterfuge in general that you ask yourself, if they're going so publicly with UFOs now, are they serious or are they actually using that as a distraction for something else? If so, what are they covering up? Because the government, notably the CIA and others, have done some pretty shady shit over the years. MK Ultra comes to mind, which I'm not going to go into here. It's not my job to give you a history lesson. It's easily Googleable. We could, but that would tangent me off of the UFO thing. So that's one thing. The most recent bit of fun and games, you have the claims made of the alleged intelligence operatives saying that we have biological material from other planets and such. Okay, well, transparency would be nice, but what's the point of having this publicly known to freak out the public if you're not going to fucking share all the information? Because I have no doubt, because I've actually seen, there's a blog out there run by a guy who lives on the very cusp of Area 51, and he was flying his drone in that vicinity, and I guess he flew over something they didn't want to have seen or something, because they swooped in on his house in a no-knock raid, and they basically terrorized 2 senior citizens and grabbed all his electronic stuff. So if you do delve deep enough into the UFO realm at the very least, thank you for raining on me right there, that's nice. The odds of you having a confrontation with the government ain't that bad, honestly. They're either going to think you're full of shit, they're going to discredit you, or they're going to come take all your stuff and convince you to maybe switch hobbies to like stamp collecting or something. Call it a hunch. Although, interestingly enough, I do know a couple of people who have, up north from here, mentioned Bigfoot in front of people working for the Forestry Service and such, and have gotten hostility as well. And it just leaves you to wonder why. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to take a segment break, and I will be back in a bit once I do this in the right order. Sorry for the awkwardness here. Damn it. Oh. Okay, we're back. We have the head-mounted one, so you can probably see a difference in elevation and what I'm looking at, as well as probably more head motion. I thought in the course of the break I heard somebody in the distance, so it might be that I'm out here with company. It's not completely inconceivable. It's not so remote an area that you probably could have people. It's a little early for hunters, though. At least down here. Up in Vermont, I have already encountered a bear hunter, though. That was last week, and had a nice enough chat with the gentleman. I think he said this week he was going to Maine to do some hunting of something, and I guess I'll wish him luck in his endeavors for that. So, the other thing, we were kind of delving off topic into UFO country, but my thoughts on the alleged mummies that came out of Peru. This is where the government is opening the can of worms to let the kooks come out and play. And I'm just kind of looking, because over in that direction there was somebody, thought I heard somebody cough. Another cold sufferer that can keep their germs away from me. As I recover from my own, and maybe keep mine away from them as a mutual courtesy. Anyway, in short, the mummies, bullshit. I'm going to call that one there. That's my main trouble with, and I can't say that Bigfoot is free of the kook factor either, because clearly it isn't. You get the people out there selling nonsense. Why? One part money. Then you get people that are just delusional or wanting to exploit the delusion of other people. A little bit of both. And the element of just, hey, look at me, But you get that on all sides too. There are people Bigfoot is no stranger to narcissists. We've covered that in the past. I'm not going to beat on it again this time, because then I tend to segue into psychology related matter, and that's not really the purpose of the video. So I'm going to actually make an effort to follow the Sky 360 folks more, because they are one effort that I do think is doing some decent scientific related UFO nonsense. And I say that facetiously because I think they're doing good work. But the way they're going about it, the way I go about doing this, you're stuck waiting for results because you're playing the long game. And it is a waiting game for a visual bit of evidence regarding Bigfoot. I've been doing this since 2003, and I have had sightings and encounters, but in what is now 20 years, I've had what I would consider to be like confirmable, I'm sure that I saw something that defies description or explanation 3 times. And to some people, like, wow, that's a lot. Maybe so, but it's 3 times in 20 years. When you do the math on that, not so much. My hopes and dreams of the day are actually proving to come true a little bit, in that I'm under enough tree cover and it's not really raining so hard that I'm getting soaked out here. You're actually getting, nature's umbrella is kind of doing a little bit of its job. Sorry. There's that head movement I was telling you about. But it is really interesting the amount of difference you see in this place, given the time of year. Right now you're at the cusp of the beginnings of fall. You can see, I think we're going to have a kind of a rusty colored fall too, because we've had nothing but lovely rain. So weirdly enough, like doing that, I might, because I don't usually have a guest. The one time I did, it was Steve Culls, and we had a good discussion about things. It might be fun to actually have like an ambush interview with Chris Noel about his porcupine picture and get him to come clean that he knows he's full of shit on that, but somehow I doubt he would be willing to play. Regardless of that, I have heard from a friend of mine who is in the BFRO, and they aren't happy about his pushing that, if this guy's any indication anyway. But again, huge organization, and personalities and opinions obviously are going to vary. That's to be expected. Regarding that's just kind of like I would be more than happy to like play my segment of video where I have a porcupine shimmying up a tree and right up like side by side with this photo and have him try to defend it. That'd be entertaining, but whatever. I wouldn't mind where I was going with this actually was I wouldn't mind doing an interview kind of thing with the guys from Sky 360. Kind of give them a chance to get the word out about what they're doing and maybe drum up some new membership, because they seem to want, it's like a volunteer effort, which is kind of cool if you think about it. I'm gonna head down by the pond side real quick. I come through here every now and then because I'm curious if that pulsing thing is ever gonna repeat itself. And to date, it's only happened once, like ever, and it was during the winter, as in when you have a lot less background noise like the wind and rain today. Actually, in the winter, you can typically hear a pin drop in here. Today, not so much because wind and rain, but nature of a New England autumn, or early autumn. But if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know if you'd like to have a podcast, and I would try to reach out to those guys rather, and see if one of them would be interested in kind of taking us through their hopes and dreams and goals and such. And how hard is this going to be to do without massive head movement? Because not too bad, I guess, so long as I go slow and steady over and don't have any unexpected things or shifts in weight. Limping out of here with a knee injury would kind of suck massively. This again is ideal grouseness, despite the weird nature. When they say there are grouse in Connecticut, I have never seen one. In Vermont, they are common, they are everywhere, they are plentiful. Down here, I see turkeys this year. Saw 3 or 4 on the way in. But, grouse? No, not at all. So, I don't know. I guess I don't have anything really against the conference going crowd, but it's never really been my thing. You can go around this tree and go this way. If there was somebody over there, I don't hear them anymore, so maybe not, or maybe they were just walking. There is, again, for transparency, there's I'll call it not a logging road, but a forest road over there probably a few hundred feet over that way, that somebody easily could be walking their dog, although you'd probably hear the dog barking, or just out for a stroll on a variation of what I'm doing and similar or whatever. But I'm having gaps because I think I'm subject out. Although okay. We are working out. This one's a little clunkier, so I'm going to have to just... That's what I want. Okay, so again, rough son of a bitch. Clearly, I will need to get better control over this, but let's try to make it through the woods and see how. See if I can stop hitting the fucking mode button and keep the camera where I want it to be and not where it wants to go on its own. Or just if I put it like that, will it hold still? I guess is the question. I'm trying to find the best way to do it. Basically what I have on this is a knockoff GoPro with a overly complicated gimbal stick that I got, but we'll see how this works. It has a couple more moving parts than the other ones, so for field worthiness I guess it's kind of on trial right now, given I do have other hands-free. This one's not hands-free, obviously, which adds a layer of complexity to it as well. But anyway, back to subject. Although I guess gear is subject too. I'm not gonna... Pretty little mushrooms. I'll fart with this when I get done with the video. I can get better motor control when I'm actually not trying to walk and maneuver through the forest at the same time. But the interesting and good thing, given the rainy day, is to have the connector on this that I need. The waterproof case actually has to be on it in order to have it fit right, otherwise the camera's too small, believe it or not. So that was an ironic benefit, was that I'm just trying to play with the gimbal factor there. And trying not to randomly hit buttons, which is annoyingly easy to do apparently. So I guess for like straight up gimbal cameraing, this is going to be the go-to until I can find a K1 or whatever, or a likely capable camera that's not some cheap Fimi piece of crap. I will not buy one of those again. Both of those tiny little things left me with a sour taste in my mouth, and it's gonna be interesting to see how shaky this video is. But interestingly, it is making me a little bit more thoughtful about my movement through here. This is a good area to use this one because it is level enough that I can move relatively freely without having to worry about tripping over stuff. So I tried it with my 360 camera, and it works good with this. I guess this is working okay. I kind of like came up with this setup in the field on the fly today because I thought that the camera itself had a little screw-on thing at the bottom. Turns out it doesn't, which completely foiled my plan. So we're kind of winging it with this instead. There's another attachment for it where you can put your phone in, and for some reason my phone is just heavy enough that the gimbal motor doesn't like it. So, oh well, because that would have been a good option too, but I want you to point that way. Trying to remember how much this thing was too. It's I forget what the battery life is on it, but you have to power it up, then you got to power the camera on. Like I said, a couple more moving parts. But in lieu of the other camera, which broke to my chagrin last week, the situation's out of my hands, and we're working with what we have. We'll see how this does. I'm actually pleasantly surprised at the stability, at least, of the grip on the camera itself and all that. We're going to wrap this one up here though, so I can like play with this on the way out. So in lieu of not being in Vermont today, we came here. You got to play with your wrist a little bit more because it might be a matter of multiple tensioners too. Maybe that's kind of part of that. I'll tinker with that. I have to fine tune that, obviously. But like, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll probably catch on the next time. This one was kind of an improv, more so than previous videos. So at this point, we're going to say thanks for stopping by. I'm going to play with this a little bit more.